Hello and welcome to another episode of Latitude. India and Pakistan have moved at dramatic pace over the last fortnight to resume bilateral talks, with first the NSA level talks taking place quietly in Bangkok, and then Ms. Sushma Swaraj's much publicized visit to Pakistan. But the big question is, how far and how much can India and Pakistan be expected to move over the next few years?
Even though the visit of the Indian External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj to Pakistan was for her to attend the Heart of Asia conference on Afghanistan, it was her meeting with her Pakistani counterpart Sartaj Aziz and then Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif that hogged the limelight as she formally announced the resumption of dialogue between India and Pakistan. The key takeaways of the Indo-Pak joint statement were: both sides condemned terrorism and agreed to jointly eliminate it, and that the NSAs would continue to address all issues related to terror. India was also assured that the 2611 trials would be expedited and both sides would work out the modalities and schedule for addressing other issues such as Jammu and Kashmir. Clearly, the joint statement addressed the primary concerns of both countries, with terror on top at India's insistence and the assurance on the 2611 trial, but also that specific mention of Kashmir, the absence of which was noticeable in the UFA declaration. This breakthrough has, however, come after the recent surprise 162nd meeting of Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Nawaz Sharif on the sidelines of the Paris Climate Summit, which was followed by a discreet but productive meeting of the Indo-Pak National Security Advisors in Bangkok. The challenge, however, is to wean the Pakistani army away from using its terror proxies like the Lashkar-e-Taiba, which target India, even as Pakistani hardliners continue to insist that they cannot rest until the Kashmir Valley is theirs.
The resumption of talks between India and Pakistan has come as a huge surprise to many people because of the sheer speed with which diplomatic engagements have moved between the two countries in the last fortnight. And to look at India-Pakistan relations and what this means for the two countries, we have two people with hands-on experience in how the government of India should and has been dealing with Pakistan. We have Mr. Shekhar Dutt, former Defence Secretary of India, former Deputy National Security Advisor, and more recently Governor of one of our states. And we have Mr. G Parthasarthy, well-known commentator on Pakistan, former Indian High Commissioner to Pakistan. And Mr. Parthasarthy, my first question will go to you. What has led to this sudden and significant shift in position of the Modi government from no talks, suddenly we're talking of comprehensive or composite dialogue? And Sushma Swaraj was the one who called off the FS level talks, and suddenly she's the one who's gone and announced that we now want to move forward and become real in the real world. What do you make of it?
In the last 1.5 to 2 years, Nawaz Sharif's position has been considerably weakened. Any of his efforts to improve relations with India have been foiled in the army, whether it is trade or energy or even the dialogue. Now, we agreed in Ufa, in Russia, when Nawaz Sahib and Mr. Modi met, that we would have a dialogue, but it would be terrorism focused, and it would also handle other issues. We didn't define the issues, but we certainly said other issues. Now, the army started getting him criticized, and he found it domestically untenable to carry that forward. In the meantime, the Americans, British and others had stepped in, and huge pressure was applied on Pakistan that they must take action against terrorists. Okay. And we were advised that in these circumstances, it would be good to look afresh. What have we done? Basically, what we have done is our aim has always been to have the focus on terrorism and security related issues. Well, the meeting of the National Security Advisors in Bangkok has ensured that the focus, the primary attention will be terrorism. And
I'll come to that, sir. I'll just come to that.
But this, what has happened now is that given Nawaz's compulsions, and since terrorism had already become the focus of dialogue, we have said, fine, we'll discuss other issues, but not under the composite dialogue which was earlier followed.
Right. Mr. Shekhar Dutt, sir, the inclusion of a new National Security Advisor, former Corps Commander, Lieutenant General Nasir Janjua, is very clearly evidence that the army has put its foot through the door and wants its man there to oversee all national security issues, and the Pakistan's relations with India is clearly a national security issue for many people, including the Pakistan army. So can we say that the army is now on board de facto in this whole dialogue process?
I would say that the inclusion of General Janjua certainly brings in to some extent the army's presence, but army is as an institution is a separate institution. So it would be a little more requirement, in fact, in the discussions to have army as a separate entity.
So you are in favor of that?
I am in favor of that, but
right.
Army should not be sort of treated as General Janjua is there and therefore the army is there.
Yeah, but that is the growing opinion amongst many commentators, that the army should also be sitting on the big table in their uniforms, representing that institutional clout that they have. I'll come back a little later to you because you've been involved with India-Pakistan talks, and I wanted your view on how it works and where the stumbling blocks are. But back to you, Mr. Parthasarthy. You talked about terror and how terror continues to top the agenda as far as India is concerned. But there is a view that the interpretation in India of what should be discussed under terrorism and the message that the Pakistani establishment may give out to the hawks within and to the detractors within Pakistan, that since we are victims of terror, we need to talk about terror. And as many commentators in Pakistan point fingers at India, that all their ills are courtesy India, which is really far from the case. So what's your take?
I do not agree that General Janjua is just any ordinary army man. He is General Rahil Sharif's representative inside the government. That is very, very clear. And therefore, he does represent the military. And a very senior officer. He was the equivalent of an army commander when he was in Quetta. So, and a confidant of the army chief. So I think that is extremely important. Look, the fact of the matter is, we have brought in by terror, we've indirectly also brought in the Lashkar through the declaration that the trial will be expedited. They have never given us this assurance so categorically before. I'm not saying they're going to do it. But we can't say we've remained static. We have moved ahead. Will we move ahead with a greater pace? Time alone will tell, and I will hold my judgment on that one. Right now it suits them because the snows will soon descend on Kashmir, infiltration will come. So we'll have to wait and see till about June, July when the snows melt as to really what their intentions are. But very clearly they're feeling the international pressure with regard to terrorism sponsored from their territory, both in regard to Afghanistan and India, as was evident yesterday from the comments of President Ghani in the Heart of Asia conference.
Right. Mr. Shekhar Dutt, sir, going back to the issue of involving the Pakistan army, and by virtue of that, at least for the sheer sake of form, some of our senior military officers also in the dialogue process, that it appears that the military is now fully in the dialogue process. You have held many rounds of talks with the Pakistanis as Defense Secretary of India. What has been your experience? A, do their bureaucrats keep looking over the shoulder to check with Rawalpindi how much they can give in or move forward? B, what kind of input did you get from the military establishment in India?
Very strangely, the Chief of the Defense Staff and the Defense Secretary were both Army infantry people. And so Secretary of Defense was an army person. Later on, there was another Secretary of Defense who was a civilian person. So it's Pakistan is the Defense Ministry often changes hands between the military person and a civilian career bureaucrat.
One point in the Pakistani protocol, the army chief outranks the defense minister. Every foreign visitor today calls on General Rahil Sharif, including Vice President Biden,
No, that's true.
No.
That's probably not the official protocol.
In terms of protocol, Defense Ministry has no control over army operations. He basically, Defense Minister handles PIA, logistics, presentation to Parliament. That's about it. The rest is handled by service headquarters.
Sir,
actually, that's a recognition that the army is an independent authority, and therefore everybody who comes there also meets the army chief, unlike many other countries. Now, why I'm saying that the army has to be treated as a separate entity is that the ISI is certainly not under the civilian control. It
is clearly the inter-services intelligence.
Inter-services, and it is the army, the chief of the army. Therefore, once you have ISI playing ball, much of our problems about who controls the minds of the terror leaders will also be there. So.
Good point. Good point. We'll be back after a break to look at more closely on what we can expect from Pakistan in terms of deliverables once this talks process gets going in its entirety. Welcome back. We are continuing to look at India-Pakistan talks and what we can expect from the two countries in the near future. We have the same guest with us, Mr. Parthasarthy, sir. There has been mention about reviving the comprehensive dialogue, and some people in Pakistan are saying the composite dialogue. A, kindly clarify for us what is the difference between the two. And B, in this whole benchmark of things that are spelt out, other than terror, there is Kashmir, there is Siachen, there is Wula Barrage, there is Sir Creek, there is people-to-people interaction, trade, visas, etc. What are the low-hanging fruits?
Look, normal people-to-people contacts, normal trade and economic relations can proceed. But again, this is subject to veto by the Pakistan military. Everything is subject. Nawaz Sharif wanted trade, wanted energy, was overruled by the army chief. But the important thing was the composite dialogue as it existed, Maruf, was not to our advantage. Because terrorism figured low down along with drug smuggling. It was not taken seriously. So our prime concern was not taken seriously, and it was bypassed. What has happened now is that since terrorism has come back and is being placed at the level of national security advisors, who will also deal with other security-related issues, this whole dialogue format takes a two-track. One is the dialogue between the national security advisors, which has been separately referred to, which will from their side, from naturally be General Janjua, which is the military, which suits us fine. A civilian national security advisor from Pakistan like Sartaj Aziz would have been a disaster. He could have delivered nothing. So this is to our advantage that he represents General Rahil Sharif, who really is the boss of Pakistan at the moment. So that is important. The others will, I think, be sequenced in a manner to be slightly more effective, in the sense that you can't have trade and economic relations way down. You can't equate terrorism with drug smuggling. You can't, for example, raise up other issues like Siachen separate from Kashmir, because we are not going to withdraw from Siachen until there's a framework for the settlement of Kashmir.
Very interesting point, sir. In fact, I was coming to that, Mr. Shekhar, that you've probably been part of the Siachen talks with Pakistan, and we all know, except the Pakistanis are loath to admit that they never got to Siachen. And so that's really a bee in their bonnet to get us out. And I've heard many Pakistanis say very often, oh, this was already settled. And I've asked them, what was settled? There was nothing settled on Siachen. There's nothing been settled on so many other issues, including Sir Creek. We are still worrying about the nautical miles and the angles in the sea where the line should run. But anyway, more specifically, sir, do you feel that the military-related issues as part of this comprehensive dialogue and bulk of the real thorny issues have a military dimension? Siachen has, Sir Creek has a naval dimension, peace and tranquility on the LOC has a military dimension, CBMs and nuclear weapons has a military dimension. Terrorism certainly has a military dimension. So to what extent you, both as Defense Secretary and Deputy NSA, got very clear red lines or inputs from the military establishment saying, sir, talk about this but don't give in on this?
I think, the issues like Siachen and perhaps even some of the border issues are very small issues as far as the Pakistan army or military is concerned. The Pakistan military's doctrines for tackling India comes with the establishment of low intensity war, by which they have a fair amount of tactics they have organized. They've organized people both within and outside India, and they have they have validated some of their points. So I don't think that the Pakistan military's entire tactics range from the terrorism within India and the ability to disrupt anything, anywhere, and at the same time taking up pure military stance.
Right. Mr. Parthasarthy, two quick points. One is, you alluded to that earlier. Do you think there are going to be serious deliverables from Pakistan on the 2611 claims and requirements of India? Because I don't see Pakistan really, whatever the pressure on it, giving up Hafiz Saeed, because he is really a man of the establishment. And Zikrur Rahman Lakwi again is pretty much an extended arm of the establishment. There's one issue. The other is, do you think talks away in Bangkok was a good idea outside the media glare, or some people were critical of it, that why was it all being done hush-hush? Because when we make it public, we lose the ability to move forward. That's what I've seen in the recent past.
No, it is very clear. This objection to in third country is ludicrous. Brajesh Mishra had about 3 or 4 rounds outside India, including in UK with his counterpart. Satinder Lamba had 9 or 11 rounds of talks outside India and outside Pakistan in third countries. Look, the media in both countries really come in the way of serious dialogue because they're looking for trivialities. And doing this sort of negotiations outside media glare, and both of us are associated with the media, to my mind is a good thing. And also now you deal with the problem of the Hurriyat, though there were other ways of dealing with it, which I thought could have been referred to. So I think having this outside is okay. Deliverables, as I said, I will hold my judgment. Much is not going to depend on what we do. Much is going to depend on how much pressure they feel on their borders with Afghanistan also. You have 82,000 Pakistani troops deployed fighting the Afghans. You have the Corps in Quetta fighting the Baluchis. You have the Rangers fighting the Muhajirs, and interestingly have suffered a severe setback because in Karachi the Muhajirs have won the election despite everything the army did. So I think this pressure is continuous on them, and as long as they are tied up in that sort of border, the incentive to act reasonable with India increases.
Right. Lots of good points, but we need to conclude, sir, because of want of time. But I think there are 4 serious takeaways. One is that the Pakistan Army's doctrine of low-intensity conflict, and as some people have said, of bleeding India by 1,000 cuts, is really the big problem, not just the interference and the blockages they put on issues which are part of the comprehensive dialogue, which is Siachen, Sir Creek, Kashmir, LOC, etc., etc. So the Pakistan Army's narrative and its security approach to India will have to change to move forward. The second thing is, the composite dialogue, as the Pakistanis often shout out loudest from the rooftops, are to Pakistan's advantage. But the comprehensive dialogue which has now been agreed would perhaps be to India's advantage, with terror topping the agenda, which was not the case in the composite dialogue. And the talks taking place outside the glare of the media, outside where public could interfere with what was happening, is a good thing, because that's one area where you can quickly move forward. And finally, those who are optimistic that Pakistan would deliver everything as per India's wish list on 2611 should be cautious, because Pakistan will perhaps deliver few and far between. Thank you very much, sir, for being with us on this show. We'll be back next week with another episode. Until then, goodbye.